Hello everyone and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. Today we're going to continue on with the topic we were discussing in our previous video, really just looking at the impacts of imperialism on the world that we have today. And again, this is maybe more along the lines of an economic discussion, but as I said in the previous video, you really can't have this discussion of economics unless you're thinking about it from a political perspective, because economics and politics certainly go hand in hand. At least they have a great amount of influence on one another. So today what we're going to talk about is what is termed as the world system analysis. This particular concept or theory was developed by a man by the name of Immanuel Wallerstein. And so basically what he does is he takes kind of a global perspective, and he uses capitalism as his way to explain really the relationship that exists between countries today. And so he looks at it from more of an economic perspective in terms of their relationships. I guess maybe the idea is that the political relationships are tied up in the economic relationships, whereas the economic relationships, I guess, maybe drive the political relationships. And so within this world system, what Wallerstein is doing is maybe in the dependency theory, what we have is kind of countries in isolation. We have colonies and we have former colonies. We have former colonies and we have former imperialist countries, and the relationship they have with one another. And so what Wallerstein is discussing really is a series of what he considers to be world systems that are really a part of our globalized world. Obviously, in the past, you couldn't really have world systems because the world wasn't interconnected. Now that the world is pretty much entirely interconnected, you can develop these world systems, and obviously the world system is driven by the more developed countries, the Western European countries and the United States. And so within this system, he sees kind of an interdependency that exists between each countries. And I've seen different presentations on this and things. In fact, you can actually Google or YouTube Immanuel Wallerstein. He's still alive. You can see some of his lectures or some of his talks. And so if you maybe want it straight from the horse's mouth, you can go check him out. In fact, I have one of his videos on my helpful review video playlist. But anyway, so the idea there is that each country in the world, it can be categorized, and each of the countries really are independent on each other in an economic structure, almost like a factory line, where each country is a part of the assembly process, where you get the final output. And maybe further down the line, somebody needs a little bit more skill to input things or to create things. Obviously, starting off with the raw material and the guy on that end who extracts minerals or materials out of the ground, and then the person at the very end who's polishing the finished product or putting in computer chips or whatever. But obviously, you can't have the finished product without the raw material. But of course, the finished product is really I don't know, maybe the most important element. But you need all those pieces in between, and so it creates kind of this interlocking, interdependent relationship where each country or each state needs each other, and it's almost as if each state needs each other kind of in the position that they are in order to sustain the relationship. Now, Wallerstein, from what I gather, is not exactly a fan of capitalism. In fact, he believes that capitalism as a global system is going to die, and is what has created this world system. And from what I can gather, he would like to see this world system go away to something, to what he might consider to be more equitable. So within this world system, I've been talking about the different categories. Really what you have, he describes each state either as a global economic core, a global economic semi-periphery, and a global economic periphery. And each of these categories is based upon the economic characteristics of a political country. Of a country. So each category is based on the economic characteristics of a country. So not only the things that they're producing, but also the things that they're consuming and the things that they need from one another. You can just Google this idea, and you'll see all kinds of illustrations. And so, I didn't put it on here because I didn't want to take anybody's ideas, but maybe one of the best ways to describe this is, obviously we've talked about the core obviously is the most important. So my beautiful drawing here, we have the sea as the core. The semi-periphery is just outside of the core, and then the periphery is on the outskirts, just like you think about your peripheral vision. If you have or if you looked at a North Polar projection, you can use that to kind of visualize the geospatial distribution of a lot of these countries in their relationship to one another. And again, what puts each country in its category is the economic position of that particular country, what it is doing, its wealth, its level of development, those types of things. So the way that this works is that those who are part of the economic core, these are the highly industrialized countries, and they're the ones who are going to be driving the global economy. Driving the global economy a lot of times by the demands that the people that are in the companies that are living in those countries have. Of course, they have higher standards of living, greater amounts of wealth, and all the other elements that go on with higher levels of development. Greater amounts of wealth for individuals, higher standards of living, greater energy consumption, all those types of things. And again, globally, they're what are going to drive the demand for goods and services, which for the most part are going to be produced in the other countries. When we talk about the types of economic activities, predominantly the economic core is going to be focused on the service-based industries. When we talk about the semi-periphery exists in between the periphery and the core. Obviously, you saw them based on my wonderful illustration that I had there in just a few minutes ago. It exists in between, not only a lot of times geospatially, but also in terms of economic development and wealth. In fact, you could talk about the semi-periphery as a lot of these countries that are up and coming in terms of development. They're not quite as wealthy as the core countries. They are gaining wealth. They're gaining a middle class. They are starting to consume a lot of the things that the wealthiest countries are, and they are also helping to drive the global economy. And we can describe them in a lot of different ways. We can call them emerging nations. We can call them developing nations. You can look at them. You can call them lots of different things. Now, when we talk about the semi-periphery, when we talk about the semi-periphery, their primary economic activity is going to be focused on the secondary economic activity, so manufacturing. And then when we have the economic periphery, these are going to be our least developed countries, the most underdeveloped, and these typically are going to be a part of the old colonies that were part of the European and American imperialist system. And their primary function is going to be, primary economic activities. Sorry for that, but anyway, so they're primarily going to be extracting the raw materials, which are going to be used to create manufactured products. And so when we look at that, that's why we talk about this interlocking relationship that exists. And I'm going to go back to my illustration. So within the core semi-periphery and periphery economic relationships. In fact, you know what? This is what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to create a new slide here. I'm going to do something I've never done before and just kind of go off the cuff and off the fly. I know I do that all the time. Anyway, so with this relationship, we have the core, we have the semi-periphery, and then we have the periphery. And again, there's a relationship that exists between each of these countries. If we look at the periphery countries, what do? They supply raw materials to the semi-periphery countries and then also to the core countries. So they supply labor, they supply raw materials. The core countries are going to be supplying money to the semi-periphery and the peripheral country. They're the ones that are going to be purchasing the goods. So you think about this, the semi-periphery and the periphery countries really are employed by, or the people are employed by those in the core countries because of their demand for the goods and services that those in the semi-periphery and the periphery countries are providing. The semi-periphery provides finished products that come from the raw materials, and then they also supply money to the periphery countries because the semi-periphery countries and factories are purchasing the raw materials that are coming from the periphery countries. So, this really kind of shows a global network of exchange of goods and services, of natural resources, things like that. And again, it's kind of this interlocking, interdependent system. where if anything is really thrown off kilter, then all of these countries are going to suffer. Now, one of the negative elements of this is that really the core country needs a semi-periphery and the periphery countries to stay where they're at in order for core countries to maintain their current standard of living, unless we somehow are able to develop and innovate and become more efficient in our manufacturing and our consumption of energy, things like that. And so it's kind of this strained relationship. Now, of course, the semi-periphery and the periphery countries benefit because they receive money that comes from people who are purchasing goods from core countries. But of course, core countries also benefit from the cheap labor that comes from the cheap goods and the cheap labor that come from the semi-periphery and the periphery countries. So anyway, that is the discussion on Immanuel Wallerstein's world system analysis. I hope you found that helpful. If you had any questions, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment sections below, and I look forward to seeing you next time.